Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Paul's Monday Market Update, number 186 for Monday, 9th of June, 2025. As always, you're very welcome here, but just remember that you are always responsible for your own trading decisions. Okay, so I'm going to start a little bit differently today, just because of the interest in the price action. So those of you who are on the VTP stage 2, I do a weekly call every Tuesday, and last Tuesday talked about doing a bit of insight into, in particular, sterling, based upon the COT reports, and so this is what people get to see and what we talk about. And let's just bring up the tool, because what I was interested in was that from the previous week, what we had seen on the non-commercial side was that we had seen them basically increase their longs considerably, whilst at the same time basically having the commercials. The commercials also look to basically go short to effectively hedge against that, at the same time as also the small positions were increasing their longs as well, as we could see here, the kind of large speculators getting long, the commercials kind of getting short to hedge, and the smaller speculators getting long as well. And I remarked at the time as that was a big number in terms of non-commercials, okay, just actually getting long. So, and I was intrigued to see how that was going to play out in the price action. And so, just bear that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, for when we look at sterling in a short while. Okay, so that's what we were looking at last Tuesday. Okay, and actually how that helped us last week. On a kind of bigger picture, this is BXY. Okay, the sterling currency index. Okay, and it effectively has been demonstrating, a kind of a considerable amount of sterling strength there. And then I took a snip from this morning's STAM, okay, from the STAM plugin, and what we could see is that basically sterling there, okay, was still remains strong. Okay, there's a little bit of a weak start this morning, but basically it still remains very strong on the STAM, along with Kiwi dollar, which we will look at as a little bit later. So, just adding a little bit of background to some of that sterling strength we've seen, and this is sort of a thing, as I said, that we'll kind of cover on a weekly basis for those of you on VTP stage 2. But let's have a look at the STAM itself. Okay, so if you're joining us for the first time, basically the STAM is me just looking to identify where's the strength and where's the weakness, primarily in FX and in season commodities markets, so that I'm in a position to sort of allocate my time, energy, and resources for the week ahead for swing trade. So these are just snips that I take out of it. Okay, what is it telling us? What is it showing us? Well, we are into week 24 of the year, from 9th of June. Sterling top of the pile, and has been pretty much top for about most of the last month. Okay, so which has kind of been curious and interesting for us. I mean, we started January kind of pretty poorly, and I was very anti-sterling, but then invariably that has turned around, and you've heard me say it all the time. A lot of that has been basically due to effectively to sort of anti-US, okay, anti-US trade, anti-dollar trade. Okay, so sterling has continued to push its way there, as you can see, and remains at the top of the pile, while the dollar remains at the bottom. And we can look at even for like the first sort of 12 to 18 hours of the trading week, we can see that dollar was at the bottom again, and pretty much everybody was strong against the dollar, in particular Kiwi dollar, which we're going to have a look at in a moment as well. So we've got sterling still at the top of the pile, and as we've just looked at there in the kind of previous slides, lots of non-commercials piling into that over the last week or two. As I said, I don't personally think it's a huge, a sort of a slap on the back for the government's performance or the Bank of England. It's more a case of an anti-dollar position, all right, than anything else. That's my view. But we've also had Swiss franc. Okay, it still remains strong, still remains kind of holding on to that second position. And it's interesting because Japanese yen has kind of weakened itself away. And normally, Swiss franc and Japanese yen, safe haven currencies, risk off currencies, they normally kind of work in unison. Okay, either strong or the weak, but we've got one of them strong, one of them weak at the moment. We could go into that because there's an awful lot of element of that about Japan and what's going on there. But I'm just looking at what is the STAM telling me. And then picking up a lot of the kind of the rest of the pack. The middle of the pack is the condols. Okay, a bit of a mixed picture. Part of that is Part of that is because some people want to be risk off and some people want to be risk off. Some of the data out of China over the weekend was a little bit, not exactly exciting. But then I suppose the bigger the bigger elephant in the room is that everybody's a little bit hands off at the moment because they are waiting to see what happens. Yeah, China trade talks which are happening in London. Also, Ms. Reeves, the UK Chancellor, she's meeting with the Chinese Vice Premier as well on the Chinese visit. I feel sorry for the Chinese vice premier, but there you go and stuff. I'm sure they'll love it. I'm sure they'll have a fine old time. And Euro, listen, Euro kind of has bounced back from a couple of weeks ago, despite the kind of cut in interest rates. The sort of looking at the kind of European situation. There is some strength there in Europe, but as I said, I still consider that more of an anti-dollar play rather than a pro-sterling, pro-euro playing myself. But certainly when I look at the individual currencies, the sterling ones, an awful lot of them are in buying. They're in the sort of buying environment, which is not the case with euro. But looking at a lot of those condols, a lot of those condols have started to get into basically into buying environments. When I look at the indices commodities, look at that, pretty much all green there, all green, and pretty much most of them in sort of strategic buying, okay, or tactical buying sort of environments there. STAM on Bravo, STAM 2 Bravo. There's a wall of green there, a wall of green considering sort of back here, okay, a couple of months ago and stuff at the sort of end of March, start of April with all the liberation, it was very, very different. Very, very different, but it has been a fantastic insight into how shrug off some of the geopolitical and domestic nonsense that we see going on, and and exactly how quick that bounce back has been, and we're going to look at that a bit more in the chart at the moment because despite all the nonsense that's been going on and stuff in terms of like NFP numbers, in terms of Trump and Musk falling out, in terms of sort of domestic rioting in LA, for the moment the market seem to just basically they seem to be they're walking worry. No, they're quite happily climbing that wall of worry. So which we'll look at in a moment.